Good evening, and welcome to another edition of We Rise. I'm T.J. Fair, your host, and we're going to spend some time on the topic that we announced that we're going to stay on until the elections are over. It's election time, and now we're getting ready to go into the primaries, trying to figure out who's going to provide us our leadership for the next couple of years as we head into the next presidential election year. Isn't it strange that each time it's time for an election, our community gets undue attention? Isn't it strange that everybody now is all excited about how important it is for us to register and vote and participate? I wonder why all of a sudden we become so important. I can remember back, and most of us don't go back far enough to understand the full impact of the importance of what's going on. But let's look. I got all of these announcements in the suites and the streets, fighting for civil rights and the intersection of politics and policy and private sector, sponsored by an Urban League affiliate, the National Urban League, and the Congressional Black Caucus are talking about voter registration. Everywhere I turn, everything I see is saying to me that we are important. People want us to participate. They entice us. They beg us. They sometimes simply embarrass us if we decide not to participate. I wonder why. Most of us will be fooled. Most of us will decide that we must participate. We've got to register. We've got to participate. And we will participate because we have registered and they expect us to participate. Most of us do it because we are programmed to do it. Most of us do it because we are manipulated to do it. But few of us get any real long-lasting benefits for having done it. It's a nice civic gesture, and one should do it. I grew up in an environment where my parents actively participated. I can remember politicians coming by to see my parents and asking for their support. I can remember hearing my mother say that I'm prepared to support you, but I need you to help me with this particular problem. We lived in the colored community in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. We lived on a dirt road that was tarred during the summer so as to keep the dust down. And my mother said, I'm prepared to support you, but I would hope that if you win, you would make sure that the tar paving truck would come by often and help us during these hot summers. And I can remember him saying very clearly, oh, Miss Maylou, wouldn't call her Mrs. Fair, Miss Maylou. That was as formal as he could be. But that's what he would say to my mother. But my mother was smart enough to say that if you want me to support you, then you need to do something for me that has benefit to my community, not for me personally, but for my community. So she understood the process. I'm prepared to participate, and I will participate. But if I participate, you ought to give me something tangible for my community, not for me. That happened. I can remember the first time that I voted at the tender age of 21 at New Bethel Baptist Church in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, located on Trade Street and 11th Avenue. I voted for the first time. Oh boy, was I excited by my opportunity to participate in the electoral process of my community. I was grown. I'm now participating. And I had all the freedoms and rights pertaining thereto as a qualified person, 21 years of age, ready to vote. And as I was getting ready for today's podcast, I sort of reflected back, way back, 1865, at the end of the war that emancipated us. We were now free. Came here in 1619, almost 300 years plus of slavery, and now we are free. The Great War between the state, the North and the South. The North came down to free the slaves from the Confederate States. I want to remind those of you who today condemn the Republican Party that it was the Republicans from the North who came down and fought the war that freed us in 1865. Well, we got our freedom. And with our freedom came certain rights that all citizens who are now free in America should have. One of those rights that white people had was the right to vote for their elected officials. Who was going to lead them was their decision. But even as we were free, the white Democrats decided that they needed to pass some new kinds of rules for electoral participation. So they came up with some ridiculous kinds of expectations that define eligibility. That if you want to vote as a Black person, you must be able to cite the Gettysburg Address backwards. Something ridiculous, not that exactly, but very ridiculous things. Rules that made no sense. And just want to remind those who are not historians that it was radical Republicans in Congress who said that that was not fair. But the great president at that time decided that he was going to, quote unquote, by presidential edict, make that law. I want to remind those who, once again, in 2022, condemned the Republicans. It was the Republicans at that time in 1865 who challenged that and overturned for the first time in history a presidential veto that then allowed us to have rights to really vote in the electoral process of this country. So that's just a little sidebar for those of us who continue to tell me that Republicans are crazy, always have been crazy. Republicans are racist, always will be racist. May be the case, but history does not support that. Each time I reflect back, go back to my history books, it seems to me that the one political party that always stood up for what was right for us happened to be the Republican Party. But somewhere along the line, that kind of contribution is not remembered, maybe not known, not remembered, maybe known, but if told, might change the perception of others and therefore weaken the hold that others have on us by their ability to exploit us each time they get ready to run for office. And now we are getting ready for exploitation. It's time to vote. And now the candidates will come before us and say to us, it's time to vote. Well, how will they do that? Well, first of all, they will always play to our emotions. They will tell us things that are not true, but because of our need to believe that they are, we will then act accordingly. They will talk about those things that emotionally upset us. And they know that once we are emotionally upset, then we are more than likely to do what they expect of us. And that is go vote for them. They will emotionally upset us by saying that anybody who is not with them is anti-us. And they will give you no real evidence that that is true. But because of our belief that they are for us, we believe whatever they say about others is the truth. Well, I'm suggesting to you that as we prepare to participate in the electoral process in the next couple of months, that we be very clear about who is the enemy and who is not the enemy. Now let's go back to what we've been talking about with Representative Bush. Are the Republicans the reason why Representative Bush was not re-elected? Was the fact that he was able to bring things back to our community that were needed in our community without sacrificing inner morals or principles? Was that a reason why we should have not elected him? I don't think so. And no objective, rational person would ever arrive at that conclusion based on what he did and how he did it. But he was unelected, not because he was not productive, not because he was not a high moral character. He was unelected because he was able to produce without having permission from those who said that given the environment, we are not going to allow you to be productive. You see, he was able to be productive when those who made the decision were of a different party, a party called the Republican Party. And if you are able to do that, then two things have to happen. First of all, we cannot allow that to happen. We, meaning those who are the controllers of the Republican Party, who happen to be primarily white males, who happen to be the staunch supporters of the Democratic Party, who happen to control the Democratic Party. If they allow a Black person that they are dependent upon to continue to support them in spite of what they don't do for them, to be productive, then other Black people might wake up. And if other Black people wake up, then they might not continue to support for us in spite of the fact that we don't do anything for them. So we have to kill this Negro because he may wake up the other colored people. You see, he could not have been unelected without resources that are necessary to run an effective campaign against him. Certainly his opponent had no demonstrated capacity, personally or otherwise, to raise the resources that were necessary to run an effective campaign. Poll watchers, commercials, flyers, letters to potential voters, that costs money. And if you've never ran for office before, nobody knows you, you have no name recognition, therefore you can't raise any money. Where did the money come from to run a campaign? It had to come from the Democratic Party, who knew that it was in their best long-term interest for them not to allow Bush's behavior to demonstrate to all of us that in spite of circumstances, if you're smart, you have high morals and principles, that you can get things done. But they could not do that without the support of some handkerchief head Negroes who also are in a conspiracy to keep us where we are because they benefit for having the ability to be the bridge between where we are and where others want us to stay. You can't get out. So the Republican Party had to have support from some upstanding, immoral, outrageously selfish colored people. They had to have that kind of cooperation. So as we go into this election campaign, we're going to see that the same partnerships are going to develop. We're going to see that those who are running for elected office are going to use those emotional issues to arouse us, to antagonize us, to make us think others are against us no matter what they say or do or have not done. They're going to say that it's about racism. It's about racism. Anybody who does not support what we're talking about, we meaning the Democrats, it's about racism. You can see it. You can feel it. You can see it. You can touch it. You can feel it, see it, and touch it. So watch the commercials. The commercials are not going to talk about the real issues in our community. The ads and the flyers are not going to talk about the real issues in our community. They're going to talk about critical race theory, LGBTQ issues. They're going to talk about those things that emotionally upset us. They're going to talk about Roe versus Wade. They're going to talk about those things that get to the core of our emotional pit. They're going to get us hyped up on things that have no real meaning to us. And they're going to make us believe that they are unabatedly pro us, and if we elect them, things are going to be better. So you're going to see those emotional ads, those emotional appeals coming across the waves, saying to you, vote for me. I'm your new Jesus. I'll take care of you. Now, that may not work all of the time, but it's guaranteed to work most of the time when you're able to hire some handkerchief head Negroes who will then join with you in the whole partnership of illusion. So it's going to be interesting to watch how many upstanding Black persons of importance and influence, if only to themselves, are going to be endorsing people, saying, this is the savior. Vote for this person as opposed to that person. Or simply because of the fact that this person belongs to that party and that person belongs to the other party, because that is the wrong party, vote for that person, no matter whether or not that person who belongs to the party that you said vote for has no experience whatsoever, no commitment, and no demonstrated compassion to deal with our problems. So we will be used, not by those who should use us because they are selfishly doing it, but we will be used by those who are using us. We will allow that to happen. Well, we're not going to do that. I'm going to constantly say who they are and what they're doing. Folks are saying, well, you shouldn't do that. That's not right. People have a right. People do have a right. If they have the right to be crazy, I don't have a right to say that they're not crazy. I just say that they're crazy. If they want to do things that make no sense to me, but make sense to them, I'm not going to endorse them simply because it makes sense to them and it may hurt their feelings or offend them. I'm committed to what's best for my community. And what's best for my community is not defined by me, but it's defined unselfishly by my analysis of what's happening in the larger community that needs to change so that equity and parity in my community can be reached. So if people get upset, then so be it. We can't worry about that. But we do have an obligation and a responsibility to make sure that those who are going to be endorsing people in our community have a history of being concerned about our community, not by articulation, but by sacrifice. If you have no history of standing up and speaking out on behalf of what is best for our community, then how dare you, when it's time for us to go and vote, come and suggest to me that I should take your advice. If I've never heard of you before the election campaign, how dare you to say to me that I should trust your judgment? If you've never made any contribution towards the advancement of those in my community towards equity and parity, how dare you suggest that I should take your recommendation because you're Black and I'm Black? Because you're the preacher and I'm not? Because you have stature in the community and I don't? How dare you suggest that simply because of those reasons, I should accept your recommendation? So I'm saying to you that those who are going to come and vote for them, examine who they are. Do they have a history of making sacrifices on behalf of our community? Have they been actively involved in our community as it addresses their concerns? Do they have any foundation which says to us that yes, they are genuine? They did it when there was no campaign. They did it when there was a campaign. They stood up when it was not popular. They paid the penalty for doing that. Shouldn't we begin to look at the endorsers as strongly, as objectively as we look at the candidates? I'm suggesting that we do. I'm suggesting that anybody who comes to you and suggests to you that you ought to vote for X, Y, Z, look at them. Because I guarantee you that in many instances, you're not going to like what you find. Now, when things were colored, when we were coming out of our adjustment to the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the Voters' Rights Act there pertaining thereto, we knew that the folks who were articulating and jumping up and down about the passage of that significant legislation had every right to be. We knew that as we talked about the ability to take advantage of our newfound freedoms as it relates to the 1965 Voter Rights Act, that those persons who began to take advantage of the rewards pertaining thereto had a right to. Mrs. Range, the first Black person to be elected to the city commission, had every right to be the first Black person to be elected to the Miami City Commission because she stood up when it was dangerous and unpopular. She made sacrifices, yet untold, yet unknown by many. So she earned the right to represent us. She had our trust. She was a person of conviction, high moral character. She met all of the criteria needed to represent us. And we honored her by making her the first Black commissioner. Gwen Cherry had all the rights and responsibilities pertaining thereto. Carrie Meade had all the rights and privileges pertaining thereto. They had the right because they had earned it. But most importantly, they had earned our trust. Most importantly, not only did they have the right to earn our trust, but we knew what their record was. We knew that this was not a step for self-aggrandizement. We knew, based on past behavior before they had this opportunity, that they were committed and that they were trustworthy. And therefore, we could delegate the awesome task of protecting our future to them. So what's the track record of those persons who said, vote for XYZ? He is the man. Don't vote for XYT. She ain't the person. If the endorser does not have a history of being concerned, if the endorser is not known to be unselfishly committed to improving the quality of life in our community, then watch them. Because in most instances, they're in the game, not for our advancement, but for their personal rewards. We have to do that. We're the only group of people coming up with this election. We'll allow some folks that we don't know anything about except we know their name, and we will allow them to come into our living rooms, into our churches, and say, vote for me. We will allow them to sell our future out for their own present aggrandizement. Watch the persons who come to you saying, vote for that person. Examine them more than you examine the person that they're asking you to vote for. Because most of the time, they have been given the opportunity to do that because they have convinced the person that they're asking you to vote for that they can reach you. The only thing that should reach us is what is in our own self-best interest, not what is in some person's best interest or some group's best interest. That's why I don't endorse candidates. I'll work for candidates. I'll write checks for candidates. I'll raise money for candidates. But I think that the candidates that I will write checks for, raise money for, it is their responsibility, their obligation to convince those who look like me that they should vote for them. Not me. I believe in them. You've sold me, but you need to sell them. It's not my responsibility, and it would not be fair for me to allow you to sell me, and then I go sell them. Because if you don't do what you're supposed to do, I want them to get you, not me. I will support you. I will write a check for you. And that's the bottom line. So please, as we go down the lane, getting ready for the election, be mindful of who comes to you asking you to vote for the other person. Now let's get down to the ads and advertisements. It seems to me that since we have been freed, all politicians have to do is remind us that we ain't free and tell us that the reason why we ain't free is because of the person's character that they are running against won't let us be free. So they will tell us that you can't vote for that person because he or she is unabatedly anti-you. And now they have the catch-all. You don't have to have any evidence. You can just say that if he belongs to that party right there, then you know that everybody in that party is anti-you. Therefore, no matter what he or she might say, because they belong to that party, they've got to be anti-you. How crazy. What intelligent person would allow those who are using us to use the same principles that they used when they enslaved us based on our color? If you're colored, if your skin is not white, then you are inferior. If your skin is not white, then you cannot drink out of this fountain. If your skin is not white, you cannot live in this neighborhood. Why would we allow them to replace white with political affiliation? Why would we just assume that if you are a Republican, then automatically you are racist? And if you are a Democrat, then automatically you're unabatedly pro-us. Those of us who know our history, those of us who want to be honest, would have to tell you, and you can find out for yourself, that the most racist political party in America for us has been the Democratic Party. And that's not being biased. It's the evidence. It was the Democrats who ran the slave market. It was the Democrats who, once we were freed as a result of the Civil Rights War, who did not accept that. It was Strom Thurmond, George Wallace, the list goes on, who were the Southern aristocrats who refused to accept that we were free and equal in this country. So if you want to talk about party, if you want to talk about party and personalities, the evidence speaks for itself. Now, I'm not saying to you that all Democrats, quote unquote, are racist. That would be, once again, as unfair as saying that all Republicans are racist. What I am saying is the critical analysis of history clearly demonstrates that racism was a tool, practiced, and used for the self-aggrandizement and the betterment of white folks to stay in power, more so than any other political party in the history of America. That is true. That is also true today, whether we like it or not. Who benefits from the black vote? What has been the significant change brought about by us being unabatedly, blindly, emotionally supportive of candidates who happen to be Democrat? I don't know of any. My analysis of history doesn't reveal any. My analysis of history tells me that we have made it when we were smart enough to understand that it's a process, that people participate in politics selfishly, and that when they don't get what they want selfishly, they figure out a way to get it. We don't do that. We will now come this election time, simply because of the fact that we are supposed to be Democrats, we will vote Democrat, and they will tell us that if we don't vote Democrat, then we are not black. That's what Joe Biden said. They're going to put y'all back in chains. And that if y'all don't vote Democrat, you're not black. Well, my goodness. If white people don't vote Republican, they're not white. If Cubans don't vote Democrat, they're not Cuban. Makes no sense. But it does make good, selfish, emotional sense to plant that seed in the minds of those of us who are seeking to be liked by those of us who are keeping us in our place. Because we really need a crutch to say that it ain't my fault that I'm on welfare. It ain't my fault that I'm not able to read. It ain't my fault that I was put out. It's their fault. Then you have to put a face on there. And it's easy politically to put a face on the other guy. So be mindful. Come election time, it's here. They're going to be telling you that it is your obligation to make sure that you don't examine the track record. You don't examine the motivation. You simply have to look at party identification. And if you see that that person has an aura behind their name, then that's a good enough reason not to vote for them. But if they have a D, that's the best reason in the world, because the aura is against you, the D is for you. History doesn't bear that out. So be mindful. Be mindful of those who will be coming to us in the next few days, the next few weeks, next few months, telling us simply to vote for us because we are for you. If there is no evidence, then tell them to go back to where they came from, that this is 2022, not 1866, and that we have a right to do what we're supposed to do in our own self-best interest. Always, that should be the case. Everybody else is doing it. Why is it that we don't do it? I think it's obvious. We don't do it because there are not enough persons like me and others who are saying that the reasons why you're doing it is because they're using you. And when I say using you, I'm not concerned about the candidates. I'm concerned about the fact that those of us who know that the candidates are using us won't stand up and say, we're not going to let you do that to our community. So one of the things that I'm going to be doing during this election process here on the podcast is when there are statements made by those who are seeking our support, that they are going to do X, Y, Z. And all of the circumstances in operation would not allow them to do that. I'm going to call them out. If you're telling me that you're going to give all of us 3 chickens and 4 hogs at the end of the election, and you don't have a chicken or a hog farm, I'm going to call you out. If you're going to be saying in my community that the reason why you're in the mess you're in is because of racism, If you don't give us any evidence, I'm going to call you out. If you use emotional exploitation, playing on the empathies and the sympathies of my community without any evidence, and you know that it's wrong, I'm going to call you out. If you are simply using my misunderstanding about what others are doing or not doing to your advantage to get me to vote for you, I'm going to call you out. I'm not going to sit by and allow those in my community to be duped by others who are simply using us. And I'm not going to allow those who profess to be leaders in my community to use their position in my community to further enhance their own posture and pocketbook. I'm going to call you out. It's not going to be popular. Who cares? It may not be acceptable. Who cares? I've never been guided by what is popular or what is acceptable. But I have always attempted to be guided by what is in the best long-term interest of my community. So here we go. Down the road towards election time. Here we go already with individuals telling us to vote for him or her. Don't we see that it's not about us? It's about the individual's long-term power and financial posterity? Isn't it strange that most folks that get in elected office end up coming out better off financially than when they went in? Isn't it strange that this never happens to us? So we allow ourselves to be used to manipulate the future of our community, but at the end of the day, even if they were better off individually, I may would say, okay, well, you're no different than any other politician. But I don't see Black politicians in the same light as I see other politicians. Because political decisions have a greater impact on the future of my community than they do of other communities. My community is at the bottom of the rung. So political decisions have an awesome impact on us. And when those political decisions impact me disproportionately, I've got to be concerned about them. And I've got to be equally concerned about who is the sponsor of those decisions. I don't see that with our elected officials. I'm going to be looking for that. If there's no history of that being the case, I'm going to have to call you out. Folks say, well, T. Willard, so what? There you go again. Well, here I go again. But what I have learned in these 62 years of doing this kind of stuff is that when I go publicly, I am being embraced by others who remain silent but want to go with me, who are not prepared to take the risk that I take, but who, when they get behind that curtain, get in that booth, would do what they have to do in order to make sure that participating in this free democracy through the electoral process brings back some of the same benefits to our community as they did to every other community. Haven't we learned that? Don't we know that there will not be certain pieces of legislation in power if we had not band together as a community to make things happen? Don't we know that the 1965 Voters' Rights Act, the 1964 Civil Rights Act would not have passed had it not been for the consolidation of commitment and concern by Martin, Abernathy, Julian Bond, Jesse Jackson, Stokely Carmichael, Ron Karinga, all of us banding together and saying that this is what we want, and we're prepared to mobilize our community for you if you give it to us. Don't we understand from past history the awesome power that we have when we come together and say to those who are going to be running that this is what we want? Doesn't history tell us the value of having a single agenda to move the community as opposed to everybody having their own individual agenda? I think that what's wrong with Black folks is that they all should have two cars. Then another articulated sellout colored person comes in and says, no, what's wrong with them is that they all should have two boats. And then the next group comes in and says, well, no, not two cars, not two boats, but three donkeys. Haven't we learned that in the political process, that change comes about as a result of us having a solid front to make things happen? That when that doesn't happen, the rewards and the benefits of change go to individuals who supposedly made it happen? Isn't history replete with those kinds of examples? Check it out, it is. So what has to happen in this election cycle is that we've got to make sure that we have an agenda. We have an agenda. That everybody else has an agenda. The LGBTQ community has an agenda. Those companies that make electric cars have an agenda. Those companies that control the space, like Facebook and other kinds of electronic gadgets, have an agenda. Those contractors who understand this market called housing affordable shortage therein have an agenda. Doesn't history tell us that when we have had an agenda, we can rally, move things? So one of the things that has to happen as we prepare for this election is that it's too late. We don't have an agenda. What is it that Black America, Black Dade County, Black Miami wants? What is it that we collectively think that we ought to have? And what is our plan to get it? Well, history tells me that that's the way you work it. We decided back in the day that we wanted to be part of the city of Miami's political structure. So Miss Range just didn't run. We decided that we was going to run her. We picked Mrs. Range to run. We didn't depend upon others to support her. We collectively met every Saturday at St. John's Baptist Church in the study of Reverend Johnson and mapped out a strategy whose success rests with our ability, our commitment, our willingness to violate the rules. She ran. We didn't holler racism. We didn't say that she needs to be elected because she is Black. We had a candidate who was qualified. We had a candidate whose track record was impeccable. We had a candidate who had proven that she was committed to the advancement of the people, not the advancement of self. We had a congregation, a cross section of individuals in this community whose reputation was sterling, whose commitment and motivation could not be challenged. Everybody in the room on Saturday morning was not there because they were looking to be a beneficiary of her having been elected, but they were looking for her to be the conduit that was going to bring about change in our community. So the lesson learned is that when we look at those who are endorsing these persons who are coming to us asking for our vote, what do you see behind them? Who they represent? Where have they been? Why all of a sudden are they now talking about vote for this person? Do they have any known commitment to our community? How dare they come and tell us because they say so, vote? That makes no sense. So examine the endorsers of those who don't have a history of being involved in our community. If you didn't know them before they came to you, asking you to vote for somebody else, put a little question mark behind their motivation. Put a little question mark behind their motivation. Because 9 times out of 10, it's about them and not about us. The other thing is, make sure that the issues that the candidates are talking about are the real issues. Roe versus Wade, great issue. But it ain't no Liberty City issue. Do we want to have critical race theory in the community? Great issue. But it ain't no colored issue. Make sure that we are not going to be, quote unquote, captured by the emotions of things that have no real value to us. Make sure that at the end of the day, our emotions are not satisfied for participating, but our future is stabilized by participating. Because now we have access to a person or persons who can make decisions that are important to our future as a community. Now, if you just want to participate because it is the quote unquote the right thing to do, that you're old enough to participate, and therefore you're going to be able to say, like I did when I was 21, I voted, that's okay. But if your participation is grounded in making sure that at the end of the day, something different is going to happen that's in the best interest of the future of your community, then the process and the qualifications and the analysis is uniquely different. I don't care what your past is as a candidate. If you have an ability to be elected, and I'm responsible for your getting elected, I know that as a politician, you're going to do what I expect of you. I learned that way back when Jeb Bush allowed me to be part of the Florida committee to elect his brother, George Bush. It was 55 of us on the Florida committee to elect George Bush. 54 white men and me. We had a meeting every Monday morning from 9 until 9:30. The chairman of our committee, whose name shall remain anonymous, who is from St. Petersburg, would have a telephone conference with us and say, how y'all doing this morning? Everything all right? Everything's fine. Then he say, Jim, how you doing? They do a little friendly catching up on the family stuff. Then he say, all right. He'd call the roll. What you got? Each person would say, I got 10. I got 3. I got 2. We raised $54 million and never had a face-to-face meeting. $54 million and never had a face-to-face meeting. Wow. And I said, man, what leadership, what commitment. And then when it was all over, the chairman of the committee got appointed to be the ambassador to Spain. Wow. So he raised all of the money, but he got the greatest reward of his career. So he and his wife for 4 years served as the ambassador to Spain. What I learned from the experience is that if you have the power to deliver and are responsible for the person getting elected, then they have an obligation politically and morally to reward you. So I don't have any problems in folks endorsing candidates if they have a commitment that if that person wins, this is what we're going to do. Not something that's quote unquote grounded in the ability to get some policy passed, but grounded in the ability to do something within your time frame of service that can bring about measurable, concrete change in my community. So I'm not voting for anybody on some emotional thing that they are committed, that they are all about, or segregation and integration, that they're all about reducing poverty. No, I want a specific thing that you can do when you are elected, you can make happen. I don't want any promises that, yes, it's right, George Floyd should not have been killed and I want to defund the police. No, I want to know that we have decided that what we want to do is to make sure that every Black person has 2 chickens, 2 hogs, and 4 ducks in their backyard. And since you're in charge of farm produce, your committee can easily pass a rule that makes that possible. I'm prepared to raise money, campaign for you, vote for you if I got your commitment. I'm gone. My point is that when you look at those who are running for office, look at who is supporting them and why are they supporting them. Why is it that there are races that you're going to be asked to vote on, where there are persons who are running, who are raising tens of millions of dollars to run, who have no history of being concerned about you, no concrete evidence that they've ever done anything for you, can now come to you and manipulate your emotions to vote for them. You do that, and their obligation is not to you, but to the person or persons or the group that gave them the money to come and dupe you. That's what's going to happen. So I'm asking you to look beyond the obvious. Don't look at who comes and asks for your support. Look who has given them all of the money that makes it possible for them to come and ask for your support. Don't be fooled by the commercial, which is appealing and emotional, which addresses your predicament and articulates what they're going to do to resolve it. Look at who gave them the money to allow them to hire the firm to create that commercial that will seduce you into believing that they understand your misery, that they are prepared to address it, that it's somebody else's fault. But if you put me in, I'll take care of it. You put them in, and nothing happens, because they knew that their obligation was not to you. Their obligation was to those who gave them the money that was used to seduce you. That's why, at the end of the day, they come out rich, powerful, and wealthy. Not because they did anything outstanding, measurable for you, but the persons that gave them the money to seduce you is the person that they owe. So I'm saying to you that before you vote for anybody, see who's giving money to them. Understand clearly that to whom the price is paid, it's time for them to be paid back. We're going to deal with all those issues going forward. We're going to make sure that as you go to the poll, you won't go to the poll simply emotionally. You're going to go to the poll because you understand that it's a political process. A process, if used selfishly, can make life better for all of us. Stay tuned with us. May not be popular, but we're certainly going to stay on it. God bless you. If you want the rest of your life to be the best of your life, you got to live the rest of your life like colored people live the worst of their life. My mama proved it when she sat on the porch and said, I'm going to vote for you, but you got to make sure that the dust does not suffocate us come this summer. God bless. See you next week.
About most of our lives, but we've made it still standing 'cause they can't destroy what's inside. Black people keep going.